Hello, and welcome back to another episode of To Whom It May Concern. I'm your host, Malak, here with my co-hosts Inara, Khoela, and Mariam.
Hey.
So today's episode is special to us because we have a very special guest. We stumbled upon this Instagram page and we were just intrigued by the story. We admired the resilience, we admired the strength and the determination of the face behind this account. And we were honored that she was able to come onto the show with us today and to share her story and her journey with us. So please listen carefully and enjoy our time with Miss Uroosa. Please tell us your story and what your Instagram page is kind of all about.
Okay, yeah. So, my name is Uroosa. I'm 28 years old. I live in Dallas, Texas. My husband and I just celebrated our 5-year anniversary yesterday.
Congratulations!
Thank you. It's crazy. Sometimes it feels like we've been married forever. Sometimes it feels like we just got married like yesterday. It's crazy. But so I guess I was diagnosed with stage 3 stomach cancer in September of this year. So September 3rd. It's kind of been a whirlwind of a journey. But I feel like with my diagnosis was in September, but my, journey of it kind of started back in February when I first started experiencing symptoms and started going to the doctor to try to figure out what was going on. So I have a history of stomach ulcers. I've had them for maybe 5 years on and off. So I'm really familiar with the symptoms, and I'll typically take over-the-counter medicine and it's fine. But this time around February, I was experiencing similar pain where it was a lot of heartburn, pain before and after eating, whether you have an empty stomach or a full stomach, pain when I lay down. So I went to my gastroenterologist, and between February and September, I had 3 endoscopies and a colonoscopy, and I tried maybe 4 or 5 different medications to try and treat the ulcers because that's what they thought it was. And for some reason, my biopsies never confirmed the cancer until the very last one. But once we kind of got my diagnosis, everything just went really, really fast. So since September, I've had surgery. So I had a procedure called the Whipple. What they do is they removed my 70% of my stomach, my gallbladder, my duodenum, my bile duct, and 30% of my pancreas. So what's crazy is that before my surgery, I had all my scans done, and my doctors, they told me, they're like, your tumor looks like it's about 5 to 6 centimeters. So that's what that's what we thought it was. But once they started the surgery, once I woke up, they told me, they're like, well, it was actually a 10 centimeter tumor. And they originally thought I was diagnosed with duodenal cancer. So after my surgery, they were like, okay, you were misdiagnosed. We thought it started in your duodenum, but it actually started in your stomach and spread to your duodenum and pancreas. So alhamdulillah, they were able to remove the entire tumor with clean margins, which was kind of the biggest fear in that situation. So since then, I have been doing chemotherapy. I did about 1 month of recovery after my surgery of just trying to build back my strength. And then I started chemo in October, and I just finished my 4th chemo session this past week.
Yay.
Yeah. And so when I got diagnosed, it wasn't something I was planning on sharing publicly, just because I just didn't know how to go about it, and I didn't want anyone's sympathy, most of all. I just every part of my life felt like it was completely changed, and I was like, if I can have some sense of normalcy, whether it's on social media, I'll do that. But at some point, I joined a few Facebook groups, and I met people online that were going through similar journeys, and that was really inspiring to me. And from there, I kind of had a desire to share my story. And the idea of my story helping anyone, whether it's one person, you know,
Yeah.
it just, I was like, all right, it'll be worth it for me to kind of share my story online.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that's really brave because a lot of people don't. They like to keep more private, and this is something that's so recent. Like, I know when you look at people on Instagram or you hear their stories on social media, you think it's something that they've been dealing with for years and years, but it's
Yeah.
literally just been a couple of months for you, and now you're on your fourth, or you just finished your fourth treatment of chemotherapy, and that's kind of a wild ride. How did your mentality shift since you found out?
I think the biggest change is I literally take things day by day. I don't think beyond that. Before, I was very much like a planner, like, this is my 6-month plan, this is my 12-month plan, this is my 5-year plan. You know, you kind of have those ideas in your head of like where your goals. But ever since all this started, I literally take it day by day, because there are some days I wake up, alhamdulillah, I have energy and I feel like I can be productive. I can get things done during the day. But there are some days I wake up and I don't even have the energy to like get out of bed. And I just try to tell myself, like, that's okay. You know, like, if I have a day where I can't, you know, where the only thing that I can do in that day is just kind of get through the day without pain, and that's what, you know, like, for me, that's a productive day. But yeah, just really, honestly, I feel like the biggest lesson I've learned in all of this is that we have such a false sense of control over our lives. Like, we think that we're in control. We think that, like, we have these plans and that it's going to go according to plan. But that, you know, like, at the end of the day, like, Allah is in control. And that's the biggest takeaway I've taken from all of this.
So, I mean, being, I guess, kind of a newlywed. I mean, you haven't been married for too long. Just starting to get to know each other, kind of, and then you kind of get diagnosed with cancer. How did you feel like that played a role? Like, do you feel like that played a role on your marriage and kind of just as your life also? You know, 28 years old, you're like just starting off life, like just out of school, just getting your feet
It's
wet.
crazy because this summer I actually like did a whole like career change. I'm like that typical millennial who like changes her career every few years. I've taught before, and then I worked like in e-commerce, and then I recently switched over to real estate, which I started it this summer and I fell in love with it. I loved real estate. It was so much fun. And just with it being the pandemic and everything, I was like, I literally have nothing else to do, so I'm just going to head into it. So that's what I did, and I was loving it. It was amazing. And then all of a sudden, like, all this stuff happens. But yeah, so in terms of my marriage, my relationship, like, yeah, you don't expect to get cancer 5 years into your marriage. When you're I was 27 when I was diagnosed. It was probably the last thing we expected. I think when I was first diagnosed, a part of me was like, I had a fear that this was going to be too hard on us. You know, like, we've never done this before. Can I handle it? Can my husband handle it? Is it going to be too much for him? I don't want it to overwhelm him in any way. But alhamdulillah, it's been something that's brought us closer together, if anything. There have been, you know, I guess like the highs are highs and the lows are really low. But those are the moments when we like, I feel like our relationship really like strengthened. And alhamdulillah, like, we've had a lot of help from my family, his family. And I'm really lucky that I have my in-laws live in Dallas as well. And my family, they lived about 2 hours away. But for the time being, they got an apartment like down the road from me. So now my sisters and my mom, my brother, they're here. And they literally, someone's with me every single day. And they're able to help. And it's just brought us closer together as a family.
I know you mentioned your support system, but is there any, like, how did you break it to them? I guess did you ever think of not telling them?
No, there was never a part of me that didn't like. So the day I was diagnosed, it was it was like a few days after one of my endoscopies, and typically my doctor will call me with like the results and have me come in so he can like show me the images and everything and kind of go over what they saw. So he called me and was his nurse had told me, he hasn't. I had an appointment I think scheduled for like later in the week, and so she called me on I think a Monday or Tuesday and was like, "Hey, do you have availability today? We had an opening come up." I was like, "Okay, sure, I'll come on in." And then right before she hung up, she was like, "Oh, by the way, bring someone with you." And I was like, "Okay." And she just hung up. And I thought maybe like, when I go for my endoscopies, they put me under with anesthesia. So I was like, maybe they're going to do a type of procedure. Maybe, I won't be able to drive. That's why they want someone to come with me. So I took my husband. We got there. And my doctor, he told us, like your biopsy's confirmed that this is cancer. He explained what our next steps was. And so what we did was right after we left his doctor's office, we went to get my blood work done and schedule my CT scans. And just sitting in the waiting room before my blood work, my first thought was, I need to tell my mom, I need to talk to I need to tell my family. And my husband kind of wanted to wait till we knew a little bit more information on what was going on. Cause literally at that point it was like, hey, you have cancer. We don't know anything else. But I just felt like it was just so overwhelming for me. I feel like I needed to talk to my mom about it.
Yeah.
So what's crazy is the day that I got my diagnosis was also the day my husband and I were moving. So once we left my appointments, he had to go pick up like the moving truck. So I just kind of made up an excuse because I didn't want to tell my parents over the phone. I wanted to tell them in person. So I told them, hey, something happened with our moving plans. We don't have movers. We have to be able to I need you guys to come into town and help me with the move, And so they were, I think they knew that there was something going on because they kept asking me. I just told them I'll talk to you. It's just something I want to talk to you about in person. So what we did was I had them meet us at my in-laws' house. So it was me, my husband, his parents, his brother, my siblings, and my parents. And, we just kind of, they knew that I had been going through they knew about my symptoms. They knew I was in a lot of pain for the past few months. They knew about all my, they knew that something was going on.
Yeah.
So I told them we finally, after all these testing, my doctor confirmed that it was cancer. We don't know what it is. And in that, there was a 5-second moment when I first said it out loud where I think my mom and my sisters thought I was telling them that I was having a baby. So they had this big smile on their faces. And I was like, this is going to suck even more.
Wow.
Because then you see these big smiles turn into tears and you're like, okay, sorry. But it was, that first day was overwhelming. It was a lot of emotions. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of praying. As soon as my mom just kind of, she started crying, she held me, and then she went to do wudu, and then she just prayed, and then she came back a little bit more collected and was like, okay, we can handle this. I told my family from the very first day. It was just something that I felt like I had to do, and felt like I just needed their support from me from that moment.
When you were first diagnosed, that whole doctor's appointment, did you fully understand what was going on, or did it hit you right then and there or later on?
It definitely hit me later on. I think it was a very kind of I felt kind of like a robot where you're just kind of going through the motions of okay, I have to get my blood work done. I have to schedule my doctor's appointment. Okay, my parents are in town. I have to tell them. Okay, we have this moving truck. We have to pack it up. There was just, those days were so busy. It was we were joking about it with my family. We were honestly, the way everything went kind of played out, it was like the worst timing in the world, but also the best timing in the world, because looking back, I am grateful that I was so busy during that time. It helped me just kind of keep my mind occupied with other things rather than, okay, I have cancer and I don't know what to do about it. Between my diagnosis and my surgery, I kind of had less of an understanding of what like my cancer diagnosis meant. And then after my surgery was a whole different thing, just recovering from that. And then after my surgery, starting chemo. I would say starting chemo was when it really kind of sunk in, like the reality of what cancer treatment really is. The way I've explained it to people is that like you don't really feel like the cancer is killing you, but you feel like the cancer treatment is killing you. When my doctor first explained chemotherapy to me, the way he described it was like you're literally pumping your body full of poison, and it feels like you're dying, but you feel like you're killing yourself to save your own life. And subhanAllah, that's the best way I know how to describe it, because I thought my surgery was the hard part, and I thought chemo was going to be the easy part. Like, okay, like you would just go through chemo. I just have to rest. I have to eat, just take care of my body during that time, and inshallah, everything will be okay. But the side effects that came with chemo, I was not prepared for, and I don't think anybody is until you have to go through something like that. But yeah, like even now, like this, after my 4th chemo session, I just experienced a new symptom or a new side effect, like thrush, where it's kind of like a fungal infection that started in your mouth. So it's like mouth sores and it's on your tongue, and it just makes you lose your appetite. But yeah, I didn't experience that for my first 3 chemo sessions, and now I'm experiencing it now. So now it's literally still like new things happening every day. It gives you I don't know, I guess the reality of my diagnosis kicks in even more, even though it's a part of my everyday.
So I know that oftentimes when we feel like things happen to us or obstacles are thrown in our journey, as you know, like you said earlier, you weren't expecting for this to happen. You were a person that planned 6 months, a year, 5 years in advance. I know that sometimes one of the first things we do is we just question, like, why me?
Yeah.
Why did this happen? You know, like kind of, I don't want to say blame God, but like, you know, that's our first fallback. That's the first thing that we start to do. So how do you feel like spirituality has kind of played a role in your journey, if you feel like it's really played a role for you at all?
Yeah. No, I mean, so spirituality has definitely played a huge role for me. And alhamdulillah, like, I credit this to my mom. So she's always from like childhood she has like instilled in us that everything happens for a reason, that whether or not we understand it, like the good and the bad, it comes with a lesson from Allah. And we may not understand what the lesson is, but there's a purpose for everything, a greater purpose. So for me, I was, alhamdulillah, like from the very beginning, I kind of had that faith of just, you know, I don't know why this is happening to me. Like, I am healthy. I eat relatively healthy. I used to work out like at least 5 times a week. You know, my husband and I like to be outdoors. We like to live active lifestyle. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm doing everything right. How did this still happen to me? Like, I feel really lucky that I've had that, like throughout this entire experience, I kind of feel like Allah has carried me through it. Like, there were days like after my surgery in the hospital, I was in the hospital for about 12 days. And with it being COVID, I was only allowed to have visitors. I was allowed to have 1 visitor a day for a few hours. But so besides that, I was alone. I spent a lot of time by myself. And honestly, like the way I tell people, I'm like, it's like one thing to kind of go through this like cancer journey, but it's another thing to go through it during COVID, because it's very isolating. It's very lonely. But I feel like the only thing that got me through that hospital time was just praying and like making dua and listening to the Quran, and that was the one thing I kind of held on to that I had.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, the way you're describing it, I think it's like two sides of a journey. So it's a very mental journey part to it, and then the other aspect is like the physical journey part. In terms of the second part, do you feel you had a lot of your body removed from you? Like
Yeah,
obviously you're like 70% of this, 30% of this. Like do you feel that? And are there any physical changes you have to make to accommodate?
yeah. So after my surgery, it was crazy because I felt like a baby learning how to do everything all over again. Like I had to do physical therapy, and like it took me a few days before I could walk again. I was for the first few days I couldn't eat anything. I was on liquids only. So I think the biggest change is my diet, of course, has changed. I'm on a very low fiber, low fat, low sugar diet. I guess my main focus nowadays is just try to stay hydrated and to get my protein in, because with chemo, I've yeah, those have been like my biggest issues, is just like nutrition and hydration. So with chemo, I've had a lot of physical issues. So each after my first 3 chemo sessions, I ended up in the hospital after every single one of them. Um, the first time it was due to severe nausea that led to dehydration. I couldn't drink a sip of water without throwing up. I would take a bite of food, I would throw up. Everything that was going into me was just coming right out. So that led to dehydration. So my doctor had me on a hydration regimen where I'd have IV fluids like a few times a week. So after my second and third one, that continued to happen after chemo. I ended up the second time I ended up passing out. Like I was at home with my husband. We were just kind of sitting there, and I felt tired. And then I just felt myself blacking out, and I was kind of in and out of consciousness for a while. Um, and we ended up calling the ambulance. They came. I was dehydrated, and then after this third chemo session, I don't remember it, but the dehydration led to me having a seizure. Luckily I was with my husband and my mom. They were with me, and I just remember being really tired and sitting on the couch, and rested my head on my mom's shoulders. And then I just remember picking myself back up, and my husband's kind of just running around. He's like, "Okay, don't worry, Uroosa. The ambulance is coming. Like, we called 911." And I'm like, "I'm fine though. I just have a headache." And he's like, "No, you don't understand. You had a seizure." And for me, I'm like, "What?" Like, I don't remember that. And he's like, "Yeah, you were seizing for about 5 minutes."
Wow.
So that was crazy for me. It's hard to kind of go through things that you can't remember,
Mhm.
you know? Like, I'm just going based off of what they're telling me. And it's like, I knew I was tired and I knew I wasn't feeling well, but at what point I don't know, like, that was really scary for me, just not feeling that sense of control over my body and losing consciousness and not knowing, like, when that can happen. You know, like, since like issues, I've had this fear of like being alone, and um like making sure someone's with me at all times in case something like that does ever happen again.
Really, those things are scary. Like
Yeah,
you
and
say
like,
it so relaxed and calm, but those are terrifying. I can just
yeah,
imagine.
no, it's that the scariest part about all of this is the times when I like blacked out or lost consciousness, because then you just don't have that sense of control over your body is just completely gone. But like also like my fingers, like the discoloration, that's another symptom of my chemo. Um, my hair is starting to like, so my doctor originally told me that with the chemo that I have, that I wouldn't be losing my hair. He's like, your hair's gonna thin, but enough to where you'll notice it, but no one else will really notice it. But after I think my third chemo session, it was coming out in chunks. But so my plan after this interview is my husband is actually taking me to the hair salon, and we're going to figure out what we're going to do in terms of, like, I don't know if I'm going to shave. Like, if I don't have to shave it, I don't want to, of course. Like, I want to see if I can salvage any of it, but a part of me just feels like I'm holding on to like a few strands of hair. And it's like
Metaphorically and physically.
And that I just kind of need to like start fresh.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that, like, you have, I guess, the strength in your relationship with your husband and your family, but how has it affected other relationships in your life?
It's like funny to say, but it's almost been like my husband and I were joking. I was like, I honestly feel like at some point cancer in my life is a blessing, because it's strengthened so many of my relationships. My friends that were close, like my close friends, it's made us even closer. I have a really strong relationship with my siblings and my cousins. And, it's brought us even closer together. And I think one of the biggest blessings is, like friendships that that you like, people that you just kind of like lose touch with, like those, nothing really happened, but like those friendships just kind of like over time, like you have different lives, like you lose touch. I've been really lucky to have a lot of those friendships kind of rekindle, and people reach out to me and just kind of, it reminded me why like those relationships were important to me in the first place. So that's been really nice.
I know with a lot of people, they feel like when they are diagnosed with something that it begins to take up their whole life. And I guess in a sense, the diagnosis starts being who they are as a person.
Yeah.
I feel like that's happened to you.
Yeah, definitely. There are times when sometimes I feel like all I do is like think about cancer, talk about cancer, deal with cancer. And there are times when I'll like, just within my everyday conversations with my husband, my mom, everyone else, I'm like, okay, I'm like, just literally all I've done is talk about my cancer. And there are times when I'll get frustrated with that. I'll tell myself like, I'm more than my diagnosis. Like there's so much more to my life than this. But then other times, because it is it plays such a big role in every aspect of my life, I'm like, how can it, like, I don't know. There are times when like it does feel like all consuming, that I can't really escape it. But other times there are, I try to tell myself like, this isn't who I am. This is just a small part of something that I'm going through, So I guess it's like both, like best of both worlds.
So what are some things you try to do to get your mind off of your diagnosis? Or like, I don't know if you're still working at all at home, or if you're taking any classes, just taking up some new hobbies.
So I have been I'm not working right now. I took a leave of absence, and I'm really lucky. My company's been extremely supportive. They've been like, my team has been so supportive and so helpful. And they're pretty much like, come back whenever you feel like you're up to it. I do want to get back to work, but I'm just trying to get my symptoms kind of in check, kind of under control before I do that. So my goal is to hopefully go back to work after the holidays.
Don't rush.
Take your time.
I'm not going to jump in full time. Like, I'm not going to go back to like the big grind, but I want to kind of just like dip my toes in, like maybe go back, like take like a few clients at a time or something, rather than go dive in like I was before. But I don't know, like I really do enjoy working, and I enjoy my job, so it helps to kind of have, I want that back again. I like, I want a sense of routine back. But what have I been doing to?
I love watching your TikToks. Uroosa. Those are so fun. I was like, she's so funny and like fun. Your TikToks.
TikTok has helped me a lot through my diagnosis. Yes, I make TikToks for like, it's literally just like a joke between me and my cousins. Like, we just make dumb TikToks. But yeah, that's been just, it's weird because like I think what's gotten me through, but the way I spend most of my days, I honestly is just like is with spending time with like my family and friends, which again is hard. It's like the same. It's literally my siblings, my mom, and my husband with COVID. With everything going on, I've been spending a lot of time with them, but because I can't spend time with my friends in the traditional way that I normally would want to, social media has really helped with that. So just kind of keeping in touch with them through social media or FaceTime, Zoom calls. But yeah, I just it's funny because like, I feel like before my cancer, I was very much like an introvert where it was like, I had like 2 people that I talked to and that was it. And now I want to talk to everyone. I'm like, my husband's like, you're always on the phone. You need to pace yourself. You're going to like, you spend too much energy, like talking to people. I'm like, this is literally what gets me through the day. Okay.
Since you're on the receiving end, did you appreciate all those messages saying like, oh, I heard this, I'm so sorry? Like, what was your reaction to everyone saying that to you? Did you, did you
it was overwhelming. Very like, I remember like that morning that I like kind of like posted about my diagnosis publicly. I posted it and then I like FaceTimed one of my cousins who lives in Dubai, and we were just talking and then like I'm seeing these notifications coming in and all of a sudden I just start crying and she starts crying and she's like, why are we crying? And it was just overwhelming for me. Like, like I know that I have a lot of people that care about me. I know that I have a lot of people that love me, but it was just for people. I think what was overwhelming for me was people reaching out to me and telling me that they were praying for me or, remembering me in their duas. And for me, that was just very like, I can't even think of a word besides overwhelming. Like it was just a lot and it still is a lot.
Overwhelming good or overwhelming bad?
Good for sure.
Okay.
Good for sure. It's like, it kind of like restores your faith in humanity where you're like, wow, there are so many kind people in the world. Like, yes, our world is like falling apart as we speak. It's crumbling around us. But also like I've experienced so much kindness and so much love and generosity like in these past few months than I have in my entire life. That it's, subhanAllah, it just really does restore your faith in humanity.
You kind of mentioned earlier your online presence and groups that you joined online to help you with your journey. Do you think that sometimes it's easier to talk to the people in the support groups than it is to talk to anybody else?
Yeah, for sure. There are some things that like, you do want to talk to the people close to you around, but there are some things that no matter like how much you try, you can't, it just, you want to talk to someone who's going through something similar. And as like supportive as everyone, like my husband and my mom and everyone is, at the end of the day, like they don't have that experience of going through some, the things that I've gone through. So there's actually this one Facebook group that I ended up finding this one girl. I had joined like a stomach cancer support group on Facebook, and through there I met this girl she was like close to my age. We started messaging, and then she added me to another group, and it's called Stomach Cancer Sisters. So I think when she added it to me, the group, she had just created that group like that week, and I think there was maybe like 12 people in it, and now there's like I think close to 100. But it's a group specifically of like adolescents, young adults and adolescents who were diagnosed with stomach cancer. So it's between the ages of I think 18 and 40, and that group has been really, I guess, a huge like kind of anchor for me, because that's the group where like if I'm experiencing side effects that I've never experienced before, I can talk to them about it and they can kind of give me tips on how to handle it. And just like, I guess without sounding too depressing, like there are times when, you do kind of feel like, am I going to get through this? Like you go through treatment with the assumption that this treatment is going to work. But at the end of the day, there is no guarantee, like I don't know if, like right now my chemo is scheduled for 6 months and then followed by radiation. And that's supposed to be the end of my treatment, but I don't know if that's going to be the end of my treatment, So just having those conversations of like, what if this happens? Or just being able to share complications or like the lows without having to worry about sympathy from someone else. Like I'm able to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. What are things that you think you've learned from your experience with cancer so far? Or how has it changed your outlook in any way? Or
Without sounding cliche, life is short. Do what you want to do when you want to do it. I would say really like I guess just really cherish my relationships even more. Like my family would always joke about how like back in college and stuff, like they're like, Uroosa was never at home. Uroosa would literally like, how your parents are like, oh, like you just treat our house like a hotel room, blah, blah, blah. My parents like, you literally just come here to eat and sleep and then you leave. I guess I just took that time with my family for granted, like you don't now, like my entire day revolves around like the time I spend with them. Whereas before it was just like not even a thought in my head. I like, you just assume that these people are going to be there forever or that you're going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. That time is going to be there for you, but it's not. And just to like focus on like the positives of every day. Like if I wanted to, I could sit here crying about all the negatives, I could sit here like complaining about this and that and focusing on like the negative aspect of all of this. But if I did that, like, I feel like I would just drive myself into like a depression.
Yeah.
And instead I try to focus on like the positives. Like today I have more energy than I did the day before. I was able to drink a little bit more water than I was the day before. Or, just focusing on the positives.
It's so beautiful that you have such a positive mentality. I know earlier, I was mentioning your TikToks and I was watching them, and to be honest, like they're hilarious. You like put it as dark humor, but it's nice to see that you can still find the humor in things and no one can be like, oh, that you're being insensitive, because like it's me, I have it. I'm the one.
Me.
What do you mean I'm being insensitive about it? Because you see that a lot of people kind of expect you to be in a depression after you get something like this.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people who are like, you don't look sick. You don't like, I think like one of my mom's friends' sons like showed her like my TikTok and they were like, Uroosa's like dancing in her TikTok, like blah, blah, blah. She doesn't even look sick. I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was supposed to be like bedridden and like sad throughout this entire thing.
Yeah.
No, I think it's beautiful, honestly, like Mariam had said. And even your Instagram page, like it's bright, it's like kind of taking things as they come, oftentimes I know personally when I fall on hardship, I mean, I know I can't compare like my hardships by any means, but just like falling back on hardships, it's sometimes when you're like in a funk or when you hit a low, like you said, it's sometimes a really low, and it takes a lot to come back. So seeing your story and seeing your Instagram page when Inara first told us about it, we were all really excited to just kind of see like, how were you able to take your diagnosis and make it into something so positive? How are you able to grow from it and become an even stronger person and an even more resilient person after the fact,
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. That you guys can even go to my page and feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think honestly, I feel like my attitude literally comes from my mom. Like she is the most positive person I've ever met. And she like, there will be 100 things that go wrong, but she'll
find like the one thing that went right to focus on, which I really admire about her. And, I strive to kind of implement that in my everyday. And I think just from all of this, like knowing that, you were saying like everybody goes through hardships, like, and it's not like just because you haven't had cancer doesn't mean that like your hardships are any less than mine or anyone else's. Like we all have our own tests, we all have our own experiences, and it's just kind of, I believe that Allah puts us through those so we can learn from it and so we can come out of it stronger.
Another question I have is your journey with the medical sphere of life, because we all know when you have, a sickness, you're constantly in and out of the hospital and with your doctors. How has it been communicating what you feel with your doctors and just the diagnosis in general with them?
Honestly, it's been an eye-opening experience. So what I've done is I have like a folder that I take to all of my appointments with me, and it has, this folder has literally every like pathology report, every scan, every appointment, all my, like I keep everything all together in one place, because one thing I learned is like everything is a mess. Like even though I'm in the same hospital system, like I could be seeing my oncologist and my surgeon are within the same hospital system. But then I remember early on in my diagnosis, they both ordered the same scans,
Yeah.
And I was like, how are y'all so out of touch? And I ended up having to get the same scan twice, and I ended up having to pay for one of them out of pocket. Because like your insurance only pays for one every few months or whatever. And so after that was kind of like a learning. I was like, all right, like you kind of have to be your own advocate. You kind of have to be your own, like, yes, they have like social workers, they have like people that are there to kind of help guide you. But at the end of the day, like no one is invested in your own like health and your own case as you are. And you just have to like advocate for yourself. Like, I think even before my diagnosis, I've spent a lot of time like in a clinic or just with a doctor, with them making me feel like that it's all in my head. Like you go in, because I've been experiencing ulcers since college, and from the very beginning, before I even knew that they were ulcers, I had doctors who would treat me like I was like just like this like junky college student wanting to get pain medication, and you're just kind of like, dude, I wouldn't be here if I didn't need to be. And I feel like there's an assumption that young people are healthy and that whatever they're going through is like, it's stress related, or it's like, it's not that big a deal. So I feel like I was getting brushed off a lot. But I'm really thankful that my gastroenterologist, even though like it did take so many, like I had 3 endoscopies and that colonoscopy to diagnose myself, it was just this feeling of like, I know something's wrong. I know something, like this is not how I'm supposed to be feeling every day. And it's just getting worse over time. It's not getting better. And I'm just grateful that he took me seriously enough to continue doing those tests, rather like where other doctors in the past have just kind of, they'll like throw pain medication at me and be like, okay, well, this should solve the problem,
Yeah.
Just following that gut feeling of, this is not normal. This is not how I'm supposed to be feeling.
I'm usually seeing patients in the clinic, and a lot of times it's younger people like complaining of stomach pain. And the last thing I would think of is this young, healthy person may have cancer, especially when there's so much anxiety going around. Like
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like usually common things are common. You're going to think it's that. But if
like a headache is a headache, a stomach ache is a stomach ache. You don't think cancer when you think of these things.
Yeah, that's the first thing at least.
Yeah.
So does this change your perspective now, being a doctor?
It definitely does. It's just interesting to see, because I've given a lot of like first-time cancer diagnosis to patients, but it's just so different, like hearing your story from like the other end and going through the entire process. Because usually I'm not an oncologist, so I'll just see them when they're first diagnosed in the hospital, because they'll come in with severe symptoms like abdominal pain or headache or something. And then it's like after that, the cancer doctors take over, and it's like, okay, I don't really see them or see that whole process going.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely does. It's an eye-opening situation.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm really grateful for my doctors, and they've been amazing. And another thing I think I would recommend is also just getting a second opinion or even a third opinion. Because before I started treatment and I had surgery, I saw 2 different oncologists. They both gave me 2 different treatment options, and I ended up going with, the one that I felt was best for me. It was the more, like, I guess, aggressive approach, but I was really lucky to where I have friends and family, who are oncologists, so they were able to take a look at my reports and stuff and kind of give me their opinion on what was going on, or help me find research specific to my cancer and response rates to chemotherapy and things like that. So I think just like doing your own research and getting more than one opinion, because at the end of the day, like, there isn't just kind of like oh, this is how you fix it.
Yeah.
You know?
Never like a one size fits all.
Yeah, there isn't.
You talked about having to pay out of pocket for one of your tests. Does that happen often?
So it's happened a few times with me. It's, I don't know, like, I feel like insurance is still like this whole other like ball game that, no matter, like, even though I've had so much experience with it in the past few months, like, I still don't understand it completely. Like, there are some things that are covered, some things that are not, and you just don't know why, and it's hard to get a hold of someone to figure out what's different. But yeah, there have been like a lot of my scans, like, I think they only allow like a PET scan every few months, or like a CT scan every few months. So just kind of being like learning more about my insurance, what it covers, and then alhamdulillah, like, we were able to like up our insurance for this following year, so to hopefully alleviate issues like that. But yeah, being sick is expensive.
Which is the worst, because I'm sure the last thing you want to think about as you're going through all of this.
Being sick is very expensive, and it is frustrating to be like, okay, like, of course I don't mind like putting my savings and everything into this, my life, nothing's more important than that. But it does frustrate you that like, I guess you kind of have this assumption that like, if you have like a comfortable job and you're earning like a good living and you have good insurance, that when these things come around, that it won't be that big of an issue. But that's not true. Like, I feel like I was talking to one of my friends, her cousin is like an oncologist who is going through cancer treatment as well. And she was like sharing me, like, she was sharing her like GoFundMe link with me. And I'm like, subhanAllah, like, you're an oncologist, and then like, you like, even an oncologist is having trouble covering like their medical bills, because it's just that, I don't know, like, it's that expensive. And there's just so many like, I'm doing like my genetic testing. A lot of that stuff isn't covered by insurance. I've talked to my doctor about immunotherapy. There are some immunotherapy treatment options that aren't covered. There's just so many things that it's a whole world of things that you have no idea about, and you unfortunately don't even know how much they cost either.
Yeah.
It's just wild to think that a treatment that could be better for you can't take because of the fact that you can't afford it.
And it's so sad.
Yeah, we don't talk about how classist this is, honestly. Like,
no, it is.
Financially suck everybody of all their money, but in order to get better treatments, you'd have to be able to afford better treatments.
No, and you're right, because the fact that I had 3 endoscopies and a colonoscopy in a year, like, I'm really lucky that I was able to do that. Like, I have a family member, ever since my diagnosis, like, my family's been a little bit more hyper aware of things going on with them, especially when it's related to stomach issues. And one of my aunts, she's she doesn't have good insurance, and for her, like, an endoscopy costs like a couple $1,000s, like, she can't just like go in and do that. And it's frustrating.
So it's like, okay, maybe I am sick, but I'm going to close my eyes to the fact that I'm sick because I can't afford to be sick.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and there's so many like hoops you have to run through or jump through to like get, to even get to a diagnosis, I feel like.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that our healthcare system is so bad, honestly, that like you guys said, patients aren't able to get the full capacity of healthcare that they can get or that they need. And even you're saying there's some extra testing that you may want to do that insurances don't even begin to cover. So that's all out of pocket also.
I do have another question. In terms of, did you ever think to freeze your eggs, or is that something that you did do?
So in terms of fertility, my oncologist, he between after my surgery and before chemo, we had met. The original plan was for me to start chemo 8 weeks after surgery, but alhamdulillah, like I was recovering really well from surgery. So he met with me and he was like, listen, I want to get you started like on 4 weeks out of surgery. Like, let's start your chemo as soon as possible. And he just showed me his research, and that supported that the earlier you start chemo, like the better success rate you have. And he did tell me that the chemotherapy would affect my fertility, like there is a chance that it could affect that. But with him wanting to start my chemo earlier, he's like, we could start your chemo earlier, but you won't have time to freeze your eggs, or you can wait to freeze your eggs, but it will delay your chemo. And so ultimately I ended up deciding to just start my chemo earlier, as early as possible. That was just what I felt comfortable with. It is kind of scary to think that like a part of me does kind of think like, should I have taken those extra weeks to like freeze my eggs? Because I don't know, like I don't have kids, but inshallah I do want them one day. I don't know, that's probably one of like the biggest unknowns that kind of like, I guess I spend a lot of time thinking about. But right now I'm just trying to focus on getting better. And I try to tell myself, I'm like, there's no point in me, like I can't be thinking about like having kids if I'm not like alive to take care of them, So I'm just taking it. My husband and I decided we'll take it one thing at a time. Like right now we're dealing with my cancer. We're going to deal with this treatment. And then inshallah, when we do plan to have kids in the future, like there are other treatment, there's IVF, there's other like fertility options that like we can inshallah like explore and just take it one at a time.
Inshallah. And inshallah, your journey through cancer and your battle with cancer, Uroosa, is only gets easier, and you only we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eases your path, and that you continue to be optimistic and bright and full of life, and you continue to tell your story through Instagram, which I suggest everyone who listens to this episode goes ahead and follows Uroosa on Instagram. Her handle is Uroosa with 4 O's, just to kind of just see that journey, be a part of the light, find out how you can help others with cancer, or even Uroosa if you may ever require it. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to protect your mother, both parents. Your mother keeps her bright and finding the silver lining in everything, so she could be the cheerleader that you need, because moms are everything.
She is definitely my number one cheerleader.
Yeah, inshallah. We loved having you. We so very appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
This is the first time we've ever had an episode like this, and it was really honestly eye-opening, and I couldn't imagine another guest that could have made this episode as great as you did.
Oh, you guys are so sweet.
Yeah.
So much.
Oh, thank you. No, I had a lot of fun, and thank you for even giving me the opportunity to share my story. Like if this can help anyone going through something similar, then it's worth it.
Yeah, inshallah. Well, thank you to you again, Uroosa. Thank you to everyone else for tuning in to yet another episode of To Whom It May Concern. We hope you had nearly as much fun listening to this episode as we did recording it. If you don't already, make sure that you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at the Modern Skeps. If at any point in this video you liked what you heard, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, and you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you're notified every time we drop a new episode. If you ever have any topic ideas you'd like us to discuss, please feel free to email us at modernskeptics@gmail.com. Sincerely, the Modern Skeptics. P.S. Don't forget, today's a gift. That's why it's called the present.